gentle people, gather up the kids and the old folks, shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. It's time to experience stories from the hills and hollers, the riverbanks and brush. It's time to venture into the dark, remote parts, the wild and woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Herren. Hello, folks. Glad to be back with you again this week. Don't know exactly when this one will be released. It's probably going to be about the second week of September. And fall is kind of upon us. If you're here in the hills, I mean, we're still going through a terrible drought, but some of you have gotten some rain. I still haven't gotten much out here, so to speak, but it's cooler. The days are definitely shorter. I was astounded the other night when I looked at my watch, and it was simply 8 o'clock. Couldn't believe it. And so the good news is October will soon be here. And then we have to get a little spooky with the podcast. We've planned some, little drink of coffee from the best dad ever cup. We've planned some fun topics and amazing guests who will join us at the WWO. Maybe, I put this out here, see what happens. Maybe we could have a live event on Halloween night. It's a Friday night. For the uninitiated, Halloween is October 31st, before someone puts that in the comments below. Maybe a ghost walk in my hometown, round the square. That's be Marshfield, Missouri, before someone else puts that in the comments. Thought about that. If we get enough stories to share, what about a live event? Maybe a ghost story roundtable. Wouldn't that be fun? Send me your thoughts. Let me know what you think about this. I hope today's episode especially primes your Halloween pump. A few of the Halloween season topics that we're planning on covering are monsters, ghosts, witches, haunted spots in the hills, and with an emphasis on storytelling. So I want to approach this from a couple of different ways. And I also want your opinion of when you like something. Be sure to hit that like button down there and leave us a nice comment below. I want to know if it resonates with you. If you got something to add, and to be sure not to hold back. Don't think it's crazy. We know what real lunatics look like. So just let us know what you think or what you've got to share in that case. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. That's mainly where we're getting the word out right now. We will be opening up other platforms as the season goes. I'm getting the nod from my producer over here. And if you want to suggest a story, maybe you don't want to reach out on Messenger. That's cool. Get a hold of us at WILDNWOOLLY Ozarks@gmail.com. You'll find our email in the description. Let us know. Drop us a line. Tell me a story. Tell me a story about what we're going to talk about today if you have something to add. And I think what I'm going to do first, before I even tell you the book, I have an old-time recording of the author that Kenneth will help me here. We're going to get set up. It'll take us a second here. Gotta load this thing. It's from the late 40s. I don't have all of it, so we'll get it to playing. I first visited the Ozark country in 1899, and since 1920 I've spent practically all my time here, living in many parts of the region, sometimes in the villages and the little wildest and isolated hollers. I've fished and fought and hunted and danced and gambled with my backwoods neighbors. I've traveled the ridge roads in a covered wagon, consorting with peddlers and horse traders, yarb doctors and moonshiners. I learned how to chew tobacco and dabbled in village politics, become a deputy sheriff, and solicited items for the paper. By marriage and otherwise, I associated myself with several backwoods old families in both Missouri and Arkansas, and spared no effort to become intimately acquainted with Ozarkers of the hillbilly type, and succeeded insofar as such intimacy is possible to one who was born a lowlander. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the bull goose himself, Vance Randolph. If you don't know who Vance Randolph is the man, one of several, but probably the most publicized and my personal favorite, who collected folk material and stories and songs from all over the hills. Vance came to the Ozarks and collected stories. We've already done one episode on some of the story, or what I call vignette books, sort of. Today's book is a real treat. It is my favorite Randolph book, and I may have mentioned it in a podcast before. I know I have on other podcasts. But for you, dear listener, today we're going to talk about Ozark Magic and Folklore. Now, Ozark Magic and Folklore is put out by Knopf. It's a little Pepto-Bismol pink book with a bunch of hill folks sitting around a fire that looks like something from beyond has materialized in front of them. You know what I mean if you have the book. It was originally entitled Ozark Superstitions and published in 1947. It is illustrated beautifully, in my opinion, in a kind of what I would call arts and crafts style of woodcutting type prints. And that is, those illustrations were, oh man, I just had it. Golly. Anyway, they were done by somebody. Decorations by Louise E. Jefferson. And I believe a lot of these are used throughout several of his books. So anyway, originally entitled Ozark Superstitions, it was released in 1947 by Columbia University Press. It went out of print and was rechristened Ozark Magic and Folklore and published by Knopf. Okay. The book is not just a story book of ghost stories or supernatural tales. That's the parts I really, really like. But I've got to kind of break this down here. So when you get into and I think everybody that lives in Missouri ought to have a copy of this, truthfully. When you get into the table of contents, you find out there's weather signs, crops and livestock, household superstitions, water witches, mountain medicine, the power doctors, courtship and marriage, pregnancy and childbirth, ghost stories, animals and plants, Ozark witchcraft, death and burial, and another miscellaneous chapter. Now, we're not going to be able to get into all of these, and I want to get into each one of them individually. So we're going to kind of touch on the book today, and really starting in October and from then on, we're regularly going to be going to this book. It is a well and a fount of information, and you could probably do a good 50 podcast episodes on just deep dives into this book. So, not that we won't give it a try, but I don't think it'll take that many. So, but I think you could do it. So, let's talk about Randolph and his collecting. Randolph never considered himself a folklorist. He considered himself a collector of folklore and a documenter. If you read Randolph's books, he brings in academics to cover for, add to really his explanations of tales, like in the vignette books. Someone who would explain, well, that's of European origin or wherever. So those people were brought in. This book, perhaps less so. It was edited. I know it is dedicated to G. Stanley Hall, who Randolph credits as having an enormous collection of folklore, and I believe he was a professor at the University of Oklahoma. I don't know that that's true, but so when you open this up, you have to kind of think about 1947. Randolph's sources are people in this book, but they're also newspapers, maybe more newspaper sources than any of his other books that I know of, and also quoting local radio and sometimes television broadcasts. And he goes into on the first chapter is a weather sign. And I love this. I love this. I love how true this opening statement is. Signs and superstitions about the weather naturally seem important to a people who live by tilling the soil and are taken very seriously in the Ozark country. There is no denying that some old hillmen are extraordinarily accurate in their short-range predictions of rain and frost. The old-timer generally speaks dogmatically of bad luck, death bells, ghosts, and witches and the like, but he comes a bit more cautious in discussing the weather. Nobody ever claimed them old signs was always right, a gentleman in Jasper County, Missouri, said reasonably. But I've been watching the weather for 60 years, and I believe these here goosebone prophets are just about as good as the government men we got nowadays. So, this chapter goes through one of my favorites, and I'll read it to you right here. Was okay. A great many hill folk believe that an abrupt drop in the water line of a spring or well is a sure indication that wet weather is coming soon. When the surface of plowed ground appears damp or moisture seems to gather on the gravel in dry gullies, a rain is expected within a few hours. Nearly all of the old-timers seem to believe this. One of the most successful and progressive farmers in my neighborhood told me that he does not believe in weather signs, but that he is prepared to wager even money up to $1,000 that whenever the flint rocks in the field begin to sweat, there will be some precipitation within 24 hours. So there you go. We're in a drought right now, and we're kind of needing rain. So a lot of the weather sign is moon related. When the crescent moon rides on its back with the horns turned up, there'll be no rain for some time. Well, I didn't look as we were in the waxing moon. I didn't notice. Maybe let me know, were they up or not? It was cloudy several nights, and I don't recall seeing. Maybe you can help us out. To go on about that, this is kind of fascinating. No, there'll be no rain for some time. That's where I left off. This is the moon that will hold water. The moon a feller can hang a powder horn on when one of the horns seems much higher than the other. The concavity will no longer hold water, and one may expect rain shortly. If the moon remains low in the southern sky, the old folks say that it is well to prepare for a severe drought. What does low in the sky mean? I know the thing moves every night. Is it like it doesn't move as fast? I don't know. So there's one in here about many people believe that it does not rain in Greene County. Okay, farmers in Greene County have told me that in the month of July, it never rains at night. One old gentleman said that he watched the weather for nearly 60 years and had never yet during the month of July known rain to fall after dark or before dawn. That's one that I had never heard, and I try to pride myself on knowing these old things and old superstitions, and that's one I never heard until this book. Let's see here. Now, we'll have frost coming up soon. Let's see. Oh, here we go. The dates for the first and last frosts are matters of considerable import to the Ozark farmer, as he has many curious ideas about the prediction of these frosts. There is a very general notion that katydids sing to bring on cold weather in the fall. A writer in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, August 25th, 1936, for those of you with newspapers.com, says that the katydids can sing for frost and get it in about 2 weeks. But the old-timers say, get real story here, that it can't possibly be done in less than 6 weeks. So if the katydids are singing 6 weeks, that would put us, if they're singing today, that would put us between the second and third week of October, if I'm figuring right. In some parts of Arkansas and Missouri, farmers can expect the first frost exactly 6 weeks after the katydid singing begins. Others say that it's 9 weeks. The correct figure, and many Missourians hold out for 3 months. I could do if we didn't get a frost for another 3 months. Couldn't you, Kenneth? That'd work. We could get a lot done. So, this book, and here's the thing about how this is written. This thing is written one paragraph after another, and it kind of just meanders through the topic. It's so pleasant to read that way. I don't know if that's just how it ended up. I guess that would be, I guess that's just how it stacked up and then it worked. I don't know. I don't know if this was intentional or not. Let's talk about snows, because I love these things. Several, and I'm quoting here on page 23, several old hill folk tell me that the number of fogs in August is equal to the number of snows in the following winter. Some say the number of days the first snow remains on the ground indicates the number of snows to be expected during the winter. And I've heard that my whole life. Another view is the whole thing depends upon the date of the first snowfall. One man told me if the first snowfall on December 1st, it means that there will be 24 snows altogether. What if the first snow come on the November 16th, I asked. Well, there'll be 176, he answered. After a moment's thought, he but refused to tell me how he arrived at these conclusions. Another old-timer whom I consulted gave me the same figures for these 2 dates, adding that every man should obtain the method for figuring it out from the elders of his own family, and it'd be very bad luck for him to tell me about it. I figured it out for myself later on. One simply multiplies the number of the months by the number of the day, and in the case the latter is less than 15, double the result. Here it gets better. Mrs. Mabel Mueller, Rolla, Missouri. Now that's somebody we all need to track down. If you know anything about Mabel Mueller, drop me a line, because I want to track. I know she's gone now, she's deceased, but I really want to find her family or her heirs, because I want to find out, because she had a huge collection of folklore. Now, back to what we're talking about. Mrs. Mabel Mueller of Rolla, Missouri, tells me that people in her neighborhood count the number of sunny days between July 1 and September 1 and multiply by 2. This gives you the number of freezing cold days to be expected in the following winter. Well, good Lord, we've had a sunny day since July 4th around here and nary a drop of rain. We're going to freeze to death this winter under Mabel Mueller's formula. Some old folks take careful note of the age of the moon. Now, let's go back to the moon here. At the time the first snow falls, so look at the age of the moon when the first snow falls. It is said the number of days the moon is old at that time is always equal to the number of snows which will come that winter. So if you're 7 days in to a new moon, then you'll expect 7 snows to fall. Okay, that's one we could test. The deepest snow of the winter, according to some Ozarkers, is forecast by the height which the brush rabbits gnaw the sassafras sprouts in the fall. I have heard this mentioned in all seriousness at least 50 times from Mena, Arkansas to the suburbs of St. Louis, but I do not think the genuine old-timers take much stock in it. Personally, I'm not even sure that brush rabbits are accustomed to gnaw sassafras sprouts in the autumn, and that's what I thought. I thought it was middle of winter. All right, so that's kind of our weather sign. I wanted to include that because of, and we'll come back to this chapter for sure. I wanted to include that because we're in a drought right now. And if you've got a better weather sign, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear what you've got. Or maybe you have one that your family has said or used for a generation. Share it with us. Let us know. All right. I'm going to pass on some of these right now. Number 3, crops and livestock. And I'm going to pass on household superstitions because that really deserves its own time, and I want to go into that this fall. I'm also going to pass on water witches. I want to get a water witch on here who can talk to us, is what I want, or someone who can maybe explain that. I don't know that I can do it. I guess anybody can be taught to do it, but I had a lady tell me this week that she can find graves with her witch sticks. You know who you are out there, and I'm not calling you a witch, don't worry. Okay, mountain medicine is chapter number 6. And I'm going to read, kind of set the tone for this chapter. Regular physicians are not very numerous in the Ozarks, and a great many chill and fever doctors are practicing illegally. Most of these men who had a year or two of training at some southern medical college, but others have just picked up doctrine by assisting some old physician whose practice they have inherited. The chill and fever doctors save the overworked MD many a long night ride and are frequently protected and advised by the medical profession. The average hillman, of course, knows nothing of this distinction between qualified and unqualified physicians. He calls them all doc and lets it go at that. Besides the regular and irregular physicians who live mostly in the villages, the backwoods country swarms with yarb doctors and rubbin doctors and nature doctors who have never studied medicine at all. Some of these nature doctors are women, others are preachers who do a little doctoring on the side, and many of them are unable to read or write. They rely mainly on herbs, barks, roots, and the like. For internal medication, these substances are steeped in hot water, and horse doses of the resulting teas are administered at frequent intervals. In some cases, the tea is boiled down to a thick paste called ooze, or mixed with a strained honey to make syrup. The yarb doctors are great believers in poultices, which are applied both hot and cold for all sorts of ailments. Doubtless some of these home remedies have real value and may be listed in the pharmacopoeia for all I know. The hill folk, however, seem to feel that the efficacy of such treatment varies directly with its unpleasantness. Bitter tea is always best, and the more a poultice hurts, the better they like it. So, Randolph's father-in-law was a doctor. Randolph's own father was a physician, I believe. And so I'm going to go through this chapter. There's a lot of stuff in here. What I think is fun, I'm going to read you one that has come back around big time. And I want you to tell me what you think about it. And this is on page 93. And you tell me, this was nowhere 5 years ago. This was in like fringe stuff, and now you can find it everywhere. Mullein flower tea is supposed to be good for cold, sore throat, flu, and even pneumonia. A tea made of sumac berries is favored for coughs and sore throat. Strong cider vinegar with salt and pepper added is used as a gargle. Crane's bill is brewed into a fine astringent medicine for sore throats. So, mullein flower and mullein extract, sumac, which I've found more and more people gathering. I just saw an Instagram video or a YouTube video on it the other day. Those are things that are in this book. And Randolph basically has it right. That's supposed to be a respiratory, in the Mullen meaning, be a respiratory. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was great. A pinch of gunpowder washed down with a glass of warm water or sour milk was regarded as a sure cure for diphtheria in the Ozark country, long before we ever heard of vaccines or antitoxin. Here's one of the best. Slippery elm bark. Now there's a so slippery elm bark boiled down to a thick ooze. And if you've ever cut a real green elm tree, you know what I'm talking about. Is a common remedy for all sorts of digestive troubles. I don't know. You'd have them if you took it, I'd think. Particularly such as are caused by excessive use of alcoholic liquors. The gelatinous bark is widely used as a capsule for quinine or any other medicine that has an unpleasant taste. Some yarb doctors treat typhoid by administering large doses of slippery elm ooze, forbidding the patient to eat any solid food, and finally building up a great smudge of corn cobs under the bed. Slippery elm bark. Slippery elm bark is sometimes given in the case of poisoning to produce vomiting and seems very effective. A thick ooze of beech tree leaves is another valuable emetic, according to Mr. Kelly Lewis of Cyclone, Missouri. So a tea made of puke root, I have no idea what puke root, it says Gelenia stipulata, also known as wild ipecac. No wonder it's called puke root. Some yarb doctors get the same result by taking a living fly, preferably a green stable fly, and washing it down the patient's throat in a cup of coffee or a glass of warm milk. Oh, my Lord. Well, we might as well go there. The yarb doctors are familiar with many purgatives or loosening weeds. One of the most violent and gripping is the root of the mayapple or mandrake, made into a thick tea or ooze. The so-called black physic is another root with a strong, Veronica virginica is another root with a strong cathartic reaction. The inner bark of the white walnut or butternut is also a popular laxative. Well, walnut trees are poison. Most people boil this down into a syrupy mess and then thicken it with flour and roll it into pills, which are allowed to dry with a little sugar on the outside. Flaxseed is also recommended for chronic constipation. Okay, flaxseed, yeah, we know about flaxseed. If you've ever heard or used any of these, or let me know. I really want to, I really want to hear what your experience was. Talk about summer complaint. Summer complaint was an illness. It was some kind of fever. I don't know that it was ever truly identified. My own father almost died with it in 1936 or 37, and his father, who was a doctor, gave him Paregoric on his lips and kept doing it and walked around the house with him around a stove all night. That's the only reason I'm probably here. Anyway, I was trying to find this here. It was right here, summer complaint. Well, okay. So summer complaint is supposed to be treated by a certain, well, I can't find it. I'm sorry. We will come back to summer complaint at another time because it's sort of fascinating. We're not through with mountain medicine either, so hold on to that one. I just don't see it right now. And so that's kind of an overview of mountain medicine. Now, the next chapter that goes kind of hand in hand with that is chapter number 7, which is about the power doctors. Now, yarb doctors, being those who treat with natural elements, herbs and berries and barks and roots and stuff like that, as we just went through here. The power doctor is very different. And here's what Randolph says. The power doctors are very different from the yarb doctors described above, are healers of another. Very different from the yarb doctors described above, are healers of another type who make no pretense to scientific knowledge, but depend entirely upon charms, spells, prayers, amulets, exorcisms, and magic of one sort or another. These are so-called power doctors, backwoods specialists, each claiming to be endowed with supernatural power to cure certain specific ailments. They seldom attempt any general practice. They may accept and even demand valuable presents on occasion. Some of these people, usually old women, can cool fevers merely by laying on of hands. Others draw out the fire from burns by spitting or blowing upon the inflamed areas, while others still claim to heal more serious lesions by some similar hocus pocus. One old lady who specializes in burns says that she always mutters a few words which she learned out of the book, the Bible that is, but she refuses to tell me what particular text it is. So I would, and I'm being serious here, I'm not making a joke, I would definitely love to visit with someone who can draw out fire, okay? Likewise, I would like to visit with someone who could stop blood. And Randolph goes into different scenarios where these things have happened. So here's one. He talks about a blood stopper. There used to be a woman at West Plains who had a great reputation as a blood stopper. A wounded man was brought to her home in a wagon. The whole wagon bed seemed to be covered with blood, and the man's friends were unable to stop the bleeding from 2 deep knife cuts. The woman looked at the patient and then walked out to the barn alone with a Bible under her arm. In about 3 minutes, the bleeding stopped, and the healer returned to her house. She would take no money for blood stopping, but she would not discuss the method. She was not a religious woman and rarely looked at the Bible, except when she was asked to stop the flow of blood. The old woman confided to a friend that she had already imparted the secret to 3 persons, and that if she ever told a 4th, the power would be taken from her. I don't really believe a lot of stuff, but I actually believe there's something to the blood stopping and drawing out fire. I don't know what it is. I think it's real. I don't think I can do it. I don't know anyone who can. But so I want to introduce another Ozark character here, Otto Ernest Rayburn, who was one of Randolph's best friends. And he wrote, "About this blood-stopping charm, it really works. We had a neighbor at Caddo Gap who could do it. Our 11-year-old son had a severe case of bleeding, and we were unable to stop it by ordinary methods. We told our neighbor, and he asked the boy's full name and went out in the yard and repeated a few words. We couldn't hear them, and lo and behold, the bleeding stopped. I do not know how to explain such things, but they do happen." Later on, Rayburn reports this encounter with another power doctor who stops bleeding. This man repeats a certain verse from the 16th chapter of Ezekiel. He walks towards the east while repeating the lines. A man who has the power may tell the secret to 3 women. A woman may tell 3 men. Some think they will lose the power if they tell the secret to the 3rd person. I used to have it. I had it memorized for a while. I saw thee lying polluted in thy own blood, and I commanded thee stop. And you have to say the person's name. So I think that's. So let's keep the blood flowing. Let's keep the story flowing and the blood stopping. Mrs. Anna L. Kaufman of Marshfield, Missouri, my hometown. Still don't know who Anna L. Kaufman is. Haven't figured out who she is. Mrs. Anna L. Kaufman of Marshfield, Missouri says that to stop bleeding, you repeat the 6th verse, 16th chapter of Ezekiel. And when I passed by thee, I saw thee polluted in thine own blood. And I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live ye. And I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. So I had it kind of from memory. I should have just stuck with it and read through it. Wouldn't have had to go through all that other. Mrs. Callie Brake of Seymour, Missouri. Well, it's a hometown home week here in this chapter. Used the same verse, adding, you call the person by name and the wound by name and walk toward the sunrise, repeating God's word, and the bleeding will stop. She says, my daddy always kept that chapter at hand so he could find it right quick. He would read it if we cut ourselves dangerously, and the great God of Israel would stop the bleeding. There is no charm about this stopping blood. It is God's own words. So, another old woman, perhaps the best blood stopper in McDonald County, Missouri, simply held up both hands and cried, upon Christ's grave through roses bloom, stop. Blood stop. So, I don't know. I think there's something there. I don't know. I think sometimes we question our ability for greater powers to work through us. Let's talk about warts, though. That's another one. Warts are common enough in the Ozarks, but it's surprising that so many of these folks' remedies should refer exclusively to warts. Mrs. May Kennedy McCord, Springfield, Missouri, has collected and written down 125 wart cures. There is a high degree of specialization in these matters, too. I once visited a renowned wart witch and showed her an infected tick bite on my ankle. I'm the best wart taker in this country, she said. But that thing on your leg ain't no wart, it's a rising. I don't never monkey with risins. You go to town and get Doc Holden to lance it for ye. So even the power doctor would refer to the MD. So John Proctor Gentry of Springfield, Missouri, assured me that he could conjure warts. He refused to tell me how it was done, but Mrs. Gentry says he just touches a wart and mutters something which begins hocus pocus and ends in unintelligible gibberish. So there's a ceremony about buying your warts where you sell your warts, and then I don't know, maybe you've heard of a wart cure. Wart witches are not witches in the sense they're kind of like witches, like water witches. Wart witches are able to remove warts. It's a common Ozark term. Warts also may be disposed of by hiring some boy to take them off your hands. 2 or 3 more warts don't matter to a chap who's got a dozen or so already. Just give the boy a penny or a nickel for each wart, and they'll pass from you to him as soon as he spends the money. Well, there you go. And you's buying Compound W all them years. Let's see. And there's pages of this on warts. I don't want to deprive you of it because really everybody needs to read this book. What is this now? Okay. Now, this is something I don't really understand. We'll put it out here though, but I think it's fascinating. Talk about stick notching. So, as I understand it, the stick notching treatment used for many other ailments is also adapted to the removal of warts. I just had to include this. A little boy near Hot Springs, Arkansas showed me a green switch with 4 notches in it, tied to the end of an old wooden gutter. Each knot represented a wart, he said, and as the water rushes over the notches, it gradually dissolves away the warts. I'm gonna come back to that water washing over stuff here in another chapter. Okay, let's see. No, I'm not in the mood for boils. Here's a good one. If you need a cure for malarial fever, 3 drops of cat's blood, cat's blood, I am not, and that is actual cat's blood, that's not a euphemism for something. And a jigger of whiskey is said to cure malarial fever quite as well as any of this complicated tree magic. But the patient mustn't know that there's anything unusual about the whiskey or it won't work. So I think it's kind of funny. Yeah, the other thing is so what it's referring to as tree magic is you can take a string and measure the person and then go out in the woods alone and find a tree exactly the same measurement. And you tie the string to the tree about the height of the patient's chest. And then you have to tie it there and it will push the sickness into the tree. But you can't look back on it. So, I guess you can't go back and see if the tree got a cold. All right, let's move on from power doctors. I think it's truly one of the greatest chapters on Ozark stuff ever written. I think the power doctor chapter is one of the best. Courtship and marriage, we're going to save that. I think we save that for June. Maybe we've got an expert out there on courtship and marriage that would like to come and talk to us about it. Remember, if you're a real expert, we'll be nice. All right, courtship and marriage, pregnancy and childbirth, those sort of go hand in hand. It's kind of before and after scenario. Okay, ghost stories. Now, I've probably dedicated more time to writing or reading the ghost story and the witchcraft chapter than any of these others combined. And the ghost stories, there's some famous Ozark ghost stories that made it in there. And then there's a lot of them that are just really, really kind of simple. There's nothing much to them. I'll give you kind of an example of each. We are going into this chapter in greater depth for October. And we're going to really explore this chapter. But I want to give you kind of an entrance and get you, maybe whet your appetite for what's coming. Nearly all of the old-time hill folk are firm believers in ghosts and wandering spirits, although few adult males will admit this belief to outsiders nowadays. But in the childhood of men and women still living, the telling of ghost stories was much more common than it is today. The pioneers used to invite people to their cabins for the express purpose of swapping supernatural tales. It was a recognized form of social entertainment, especially favored by people who did not hold with dancing or card playing. And here's one that's really always struck me. Mrs. May Kennedy McCord of Springfield, Missouri, thinks that the decay of ghost stories in the Ozarks is due to the fact that there are so few really lonesome places nowadays. In order to raise a good crop of ghosts, she says, we must have a lot of old mills and deserted houses and covered bridges, and these romantic spots are not so common as they used to be. It seems to me that Ozark ghost stories do not differ greatly from those that are told in other sections of the United States. An account of Ozark superstition, however, would be incomplete without any mention of these tales. So, there's some funny ones in here. And I have a great partner for telling ghost stories, and so I have to kind of pick and choose through here because I know you're going to hear some of these in another episode. So one of the favorite stories here, and one that we will that happens in many parts of the Ozarks, is one hears of a cabin which is haunted by a wood-chopping ghost. Now, people who try to camp there are kept awake by something chopping wood all night. At intervals, one can hear a grindstone being turned slowly to sharpen an axe, and even detect a change in the sound every few minutes, as if water were being poured on the stone. But there is no grindstone in the vicinity. Nobody has lived there for more than 20 years. An old lady in McDonald County, Missouri, told me that she once sat alone in her two-room cabin with the door bolted and the windows fastened on the inside. Suddenly she heard the latch on the door move and the sound of a heavy man walking across the floor. I could hear one of his boots squeak at every step, she said, and then I heard the dipper rattle in the water bucket. And then I heard, Let me repeat that. And then I heard the dipper rattle in the water bucket like somebody was getting a drink. The old woman jumped up and ran into the kitchen, but there was nobody there. The door was still bolted, and the windows were still fastened on the inside. That's a great one. It's Randolph picked these up as he went along. Some of them are from other people. Tom Moore, Judge Tom Moore, who wrote a book, A Weird and Mysterious Tales of the Ozark. No, that's not what it's called. What's it called? Forget it right here. He wrote about, oh, come on. Well, Tom Moore wrote a book, Judge Tom Moore from Christian Mysterious. Here it is right here. If I could just look down at the darn page. Mysterious Tales and Legends of the Ozarks. And it's written, it's been years out of print. It's been 70 years out of print probably. And it's kind of thick. The language is kind of thick. It's not necessarily clear. But he does record several versions of the Bread Tray Mountain story in that book. He also, The Ghost of Sand Springs, and what was the other one? There was another one. Oh, well. It's a Civil War ghost story. I just don't remember what it is. So another place, we're going to go back. We're going to revisit this one. Some 50 miles south of Springfield, we're going to talk about the Oak Grove Schoolhouse. Now, the Oak Grove Schoolhouse, there are two of them. There is the Oak Grove Schoolhouse in which Captain Kinney, the ball knobber leader, was killed in. And there's the Oak Grove Schoolhouse at Crane. The Oak Grove Schoolhouse at Crane is on the Wire Road. I'm not sure about the other one. Maybe you can tell me if you're out there. But there are several stories involving the Oak Grove Schoolhouse. And one of Randolph's informants, Elbert Short, is buried at the Oak Grove Cemetery, the one just north of Crane. Yeah, that's right, just north of Crane. So, yeah, we're going to go into that one. And we'll save it. Not going to give it to you. So there are many tales about ghosts who speak to people, telling them to dig at such and such place to find a buried treasure. The ghost is usually that of the fellow who died without being able to tell anybody where his treasure was concealed. He cannot get any rest until someone gets the money and enjoys it. I met one man who had a persistent vision in which his grandfather, dead for many years, appeared and told him such a tale. After having this dream 3 nights running, he dug at the place indicated. He found no treasure, but left the hole open so the ghost could see that his instructions had been carried out. Apparently, the grandfather's spirit was satisfied since the man had no more of these disturbing dreams. We'll go back here. We're gonna find out. We're gonna go into some different haunted places. If you've got this book, you can go ahead and read ahead. There's one on booger dogs. I know we've got something coming up on that. I think I'll just skip the ghost story chapter the rest of the way, because so much of this we're going to get into. Now, probably one of the most fascinating chapters is the animal and plants chapter, which follows. And one of the topics I've actually worked on before involves albino deer. Marshfield had an albino deer living on the outskirts, and I got fascinated with it. And I got fascinated with the story of Whiteheart and St. Hubert. And also, the Ozarks has a particular set of lore. And I want to share that with you because I think we're coming up on deer season here. I'm going to have a deer hunting folklore primer, hopefully, for you in November. Something I'm working on. Maybe not get it done. I'm going to try. There is generally believed that the appearance of an albino deer is a bad sign. Some hill folk think it has something to do with witches' work. Others that it's an indication of disease among the deer and that the venison will be unwholesome for 7 years. In 1939, a white deer was seen in Taney County, Missouri, and many natives were pretty much upset about it. Mrs. C.P. Mankey of Mincy, Missouri, wrote to a local newspaper, "I cannot overcome a subtle, uneasy feeling that this may be a token, in other words, an omen or warning." But old-timers use the old words. Tokens or warnings or, we'll get into that some other time. So, right as World War II started, I guess Mrs. Mankey was right. Let's see here. What else do we have on animals, plants? Oh, that one of the, Randolph documents, Marvel Cave. We're all familiar with Marvel Cave. It's at Silver Dollar City. It's where you go in the afternoon when you're really hot from Silver Dollar City, or when it's raining, you go in there. Marvel Cave, near Notch, Missouri, was regarded with superstitious awe by many of the old-timers who used to warn tourists to stay away from the place. A school teacher at Walnut Grove, Missouri, declared that one subterranean room was literally full of bones of panthers and bobcats. All of these animals for miles around, according to the old story, made their way into the cavern before they died to leave their bodies with those of their ancestors in the cat room. It is true that the bones of panthers and wildcats, along with those of deer, elk, bears, and other animals, have been found in Marvel Cave, but the cat room story is obviously a myth. Here we go. Let's keep with the panthers. Many of the old settlers believe that panthers, or painters, that's the old-time way of saying it, have a great appetite for human infants and will go to almost any length to obtain one. It is said that they locate babies by smelling the mother's milk as the babe is fed. Wayman Hogues tells several stories of panthers devouring babies. Wayman Hogue also was windy. He just tell you the truth. That's documented. That just didn't take it from Champ. That's take it from other people too. At Hogue's own home in Van Buren County, Arkansas, a painter fought their dog to a standstill and came down the chimney after a 5-day-old infant. The beast was driven off by Hogue's mother, who tore open a straw mattress and threw the straw on the fire, producing a great blaze through which the painter could not descend. Well, I guess that's how Wayman Hogue lived to adulthood to write up his stories. I'm not saying Wayman Hogue's a liar, but Wayman Hogue, and I'm going to say that I heard Dr. Brooks Blevins say, who's a professor of Ozark stuff at SMS, that's the official chair of professor of Ozark stuff, that he found that some of Hogue's things could not be documented and were sort of made up. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I understand. Here's one. There is a very general notion in southwest Missouri that there were no rats in the Ozarks in the early days until they were brought in by settlers from the east. One John Cooper, who lives in Springfield, Missouri in the early 1900s, always contended that there were no rats until the Frisco Railroad came in. The rats arrived in boxcars, he said, and later took to the woods and became as common everywhere as they are today. There you go. All right. So we move on from plants and animals, and we move in. There are really two more chapters, death and burial and Ozark witchcraft. I'm going to kind of give you just a sense of both, because we're going to come back to both during Halloween. So during the Halloween season. Sorry if you're hearing the pages on this. Flipping through here. So Ozark witchcraft, and let me just kind of give my typical Ozark witchcraft disclaimer. We don't believe in witchcraft. We don't practice witchcraft. We study this because I'm really curious where Ozark witchcraft came from, the origin. Is it a one particular set of beliefs, or is it an evolving set of beliefs that ended up here on the frontier, basically a melting pot of several different traditions? And I'm fascinated by that, because in the Missouri Ozarks, in particular where I live, there are so many different influences. People they didn't dig up some ground and plant some hillbilly seeds and water them and everybody just grew here. They had to come from somewhere, and they brought with them everything from before. And so when you look at something like Ozark's witchcraft, what are you exactly talking about? Are you talking about, it's not like green-faced Margaret Hamilton and flying monkeys. We're not doing that. We're not dropping houses on people. What we're talking about is, I think, basically an explanation when no other is apparent for a sickness or for some sort of loss. And I'm going to open that up a little bit, unpack it. I want to read what Randolph, the small paragraph, and this is chapter 12. The Ozark hill folk will talk about crop failures and weather signs with any tourist who happens along, but let him mention witches and they all shut up like clams. If they say anything at all on the subject, it will be that they do not believe any such foolishness. Some of them will even deny that they ever heard of witches or witchmasters. So Randolph very, very slowly collected his material on witchcraft. And Randolph had some very good informants. One of them is Mabel Mueller. Mabel Mueller was from Rolla, Missouri, and had documented folklore in Phelps County and the surrounding counties. And we really want to know what happened to her papers, because as far as I know, it's unprinted and I cannot find them. So if you're from Rolla and you're familiar with this Mabel E. Mueller, who is, I really wish I had lived in time to meet her. She also wrote an article called Sparks and the Spindle in the paper. Let me know, because she brings up some just fabulous stuff, and I'd love to see what else is in the file. So when we talk about Ozark witchcraft, we really talk about men and women who can do things. And it's a conjure or spell-based type situation. But most often than not, it runs into sort of a feud. All of these stories involve somebody who's really trying to get back at somebody else. And one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is witching milk. Now, there are many, witching of milk is very old. It goes back, there's a woodcut from the 1500s that shows a witch milking an axe handle. And in the Ozarks, it goes, here's one version of how you steal milk. Another well-known tale is concerned with a witch who assumed the form of a swamp rabbit and lived on milk. A farmer saw this big rabbit suck his cow and fired at it with a load of turkey shot. The animal was only 30 feet off, but seemed quite unharmed. The man rushed home and molded several slugs of silver obtained by melting dollars. Charging his shotgun with these, he fired again and killed the rabbit. A few hours later, news came that an old woman in the next holler had been shot to death. The doctor couldn't find the bullet, but everybody knew it must have been the silver slug that killed her. Okay, actually, I didn't mean to read that. That was on Familiars. But so we have a witch stealing milk. Well, let's talk about how else they do it. Randolph writes, and I'm going to paraphrase this, I'm not going to read it, basically about a fella who looked in, and he saw a woman put a tea towel or a dish towel on a pot rack above the stove, and she had a bucket sitting below it, and she said something, and she started milking the dish rag until she had filled her bucket up. At the same time, the neighbor had cows across the road from her house, and he could see their bags shrinking. So she had conjured the milk from the cows without going out there and doing it. She'd done it remotely. Now, if you've studied any kind of like academically studied magic or well read on, I'm curious what exactly do you call that? Is that some sort of conjuring? Is that some sort of, what would you exactly call witching milk? I'm not sure. Here's another fun one. There's a common belief that if a witch stirs soft soap, it won't be any good. A farmer's wife in Christian County, Missouri, was making soap in the backyard when an alleged witch came along. Immediately, the woman raked the fire out from under the kettle and invited the witch into the house. When the witch had gone, the housewife found that every bit of soap had boiled away, although there wasn't any fire under it. Also, onions. If you have a plate of sliced onions on your table and a witch enters, they're supposed to simultaneously spoil. The onions will spoil. Also, if you have silver in your pocket, the coins will turn black. If you should touch a witch. Let's see, what else? You can tell a witch, if someone's a witch, by putting some pawpaw bark in their pipe tobacco. That'll make them violently ill. Or you can put an awl on up through a chair. A virtuous woman will sit on it. A witch will jump up. See how that works out. I wouldn't want to be hung over that test alone, I'd say. A little salt. You can put salt in her chair and she'll stick to the chair. Or you can put a Bible under her bed and give her violent fits. Those are just some of the things that are in here. And we're going to get more into Ozark witchcraft. I'm going to end right now with everybody's final problem, death customs. The death and burial customs of the Ozarks were sort of dictated by a couple of things. First of all, there was no embalming, and embalming costs money, so it was not common for bodies to be unembalmed up through the World War II era. I've got a funny story on that sometime too, but so most funeral customs in the Ozark are dictated by the fact that the body needs to be buried very quickly. And a lot of the superstitions surrounding it involve the family. For instance, and I'm just going to list off a few that are covered in this chapter here. For instance, when a person dies, you need to stop the clock, because it's bad luck for a clock to run in a house where a corpse lay. You need to go tell the beehives that the master of the house has died so the bees don't fly away. You need to go and shroud all the mirrors, for it's bad luck to, and probably will result in your own death if you see a corpse, a reflection of yourself in a house where a corpse lay. And I've always wondered, we always take food when people die. I mean, every one of us probably listening has done that, take something to the bereaved family. Here's a legend that I always wondered if it's part of this. Obviously, people do that because they care about others and they love others, but it's bad luck to cook in a house where a corpse lay. However, Randolph argues it's not bad luck to cook in a lean-to kitchen. It's just you can't cook in the cabin proper where the corpse lays. All the chairs have to be put up, and some people don't sit during the day. The body, they say a man may be dirty his whole life, but he goes to the ground clean in the Ozarks. First of all, the family are not to handle the body. That's left to friends, neighbors, in-laws. They scrub the body and boil their clothes. The men make a coffin, and it's all handled rather rapidly because then you sit up that night. One of the euphemisms in the Ozarks that refers to that is they wash the dead man's clothes. And one says, I expect to see poor Jim's breeches hanging on the line any day, as the fact that Jim wasn't expected to live long. Another fun concept is when you lay out a corpse is obviously you wrap sheets around the section to keep it from bloating, particularly in hot weather. There might be, you use wahoo bark tea, or which is a type of unanimous to use it to keep the face white. Some of the old, others wrap the head in a towel. I'm just reading right here, with a wet towel with soda water, believing this will prevent the skin from turning color and keep the face fresh. A lot of country people in Arkansas place a saucer of salt on the abdomen of the corpse to keep the belly from rising. So that's some of the fun of Ozark death and burial customs. All in all, we've covered several chapters in this 300-page book. I want to remind you again, you can find it as Ozark Magic and Folklore. If you go on eBay, you can find a used copy, or you can find, maybe you want to find an original Ozark Superstitions. The first edition with the dust covers are pretty pricey. I've got one. I'm looking at it on my shelf. We don't use it. I have a reprint that I use so I can mark my notes in it. Those are available, but that's also illegal because this isn't completely public domain yet. I didn't realize that when I bought it. But you can find it under Ozark Magic and Folklore. I want to encourage you to send us, if you've got some ghost stories or some supernatural tales of your own, or anything we've covered in this podcast, please let us know. Please let us know if you've got something that we need to find out. So yeah, we're excited to try to get together with you all. I'm thinking we could do a walk around the Marshfield Square and talk about the macabre history of Marshfield. Let's see. Tell me what you think. Thank you again. Gentle people, thank you for joining us today as we learned about some Ozark superstitions. And we even heard from old Vance Randolph himself. If you enjoyed our time together, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit the ding-a-ling thing so you don't miss the next episode. Follow us on this platform, as well as Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. They're coming. They're not here yet, but we're working on it. Kenneth's nodding. Look for updates and extra content. Thank you. Maybe you have a local mystery legend or historical fact that needs plumbed, or maybe you have another wild story to share, or maybe you want to tell us something important that's going on. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe you have that ghost story. Hint, hint, hint. I'm not going to let up. Drop us a line at wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. I want to thank you again. Until next time, my producer is Kenneth Herren. You all be good, and you all be careful. And boys, if you would, please be good to the tourists. Bye now.